Hi, I'm Matt from HockeyReviews.ca, and this is the CCM Eflex 5 pad compared to the CCM Axis pad, doing a bit of a comparison review. This is now the first family of lines that CCM has no Lefebvre influence anymore. Obviously, these pads have a lot of 20.1 similarities to them, and these ones are obviously very similar to the previous Eflexes, which Lefebvre did do. This is where we see CCM kind of depart and do their own thing. So I'm going to talk about just the differences between these two and kind of what you should be looking for between them and what would make you like one or the other. This pad now comes with a different rebound thing, so I'll kind of show that off in a little bit, but it kind of blurs the line between the two. But obviously the idea of here is these are still the softer rebound face, unless you go custom, pad that's supposed to be a bit more flexible, and this is the stiffer butterfly style of pad, obviously. So these are a 34+2 as well as this pad right here, but when I wore this pad, it fit like a 35+2 CCM in the past. I mentioned that in my review on this, so I'm going to show you how these fit on your knee in a separate later on, and kind of show a comparison of the sizes between the two, just so you can kind of get an idea, because I always recommended people go to different sizing on these compared to like what they did in the past for CCM gear. But before all of that, this video almost didn't happen. I had to buy this Eflex 5 set outright in order to just make any content on this, and thanks to a friend who's lending me these Axis set to actually make more content on as well. About that Axis set, it is for sale. Check out the link in the description to Kijiji. That has all the information on the set itself. Send me a message through there or on here if you're interested in, if you want to buy them. I'm selling them for that friend. He doesn't want to ship them anywhere and couldn't find anyone locally to get them, so I'll happily ship them out. I do it all the time for gear I'm not using, so I'll help him out there. He helped me and let me borrow these for review. I'll help him move the pads, and well, it's the whole set. So yeah, besides that, I had to buy this Eflex 5 set outright, and I don't want this plain white obvious set, so they're going to be returned, so I can't do any testing on them, unfortunately. But if you ever make a purchase, or if any of my videos are helpful in making purchases towards gear, or you want to see me review sets, please reach out to the companies on social media and let them know. For example, if this video helps you decide between Axis and Eflex 5 and you go with one or the other, please reach out to CCM on social media and say, hey, Hockey Reviews helped me out with this. It was greatly appreciated. So I don't get any sets for free, so any type of gear I want to actually make content for and actually use and do the tests and stuff like that, like the rebound tests or any like on ice stuff, I have to pay for. I'm not asking companies to give me free sets, free custom sets, so I can get free custom sets. I'm really happy just to get demo sets. I know CCM has like a huge demo fleet of gear. Bauer does it as well. Like all the companies really do, that they give to reps and they bring out to different stores and different demo days. I'd be absolutely thrilled to get a demo, just one of those demo sets, use it for a couple days, do my tests on it, and then happily send it back on my dime. But whenever I ask for that, I just get crickets and no one wants to do it. So if you want to see me review gear, reach out to the companies and let them know and say, hey, I want to see Hockey Reviews do a review of your stuff. It would really help out, type thing. That'd be greatly appreciated for me. One final thing, if you want to support the channel and you live in the United States, check out the link in the description to Pure Hockey, Pure Goalie. Clicking that link, making a purchase, it gives me a kickback. So again, it helps support the channel so I can keep buying gear and doing reviews on stuff like that. Otherwise, if you just want to support the channel, check out the links in the description too. Patreon, buy me a coffee. Anything that goes through there comes right back into the channel and will help me make more content and more reviews and doing actual tests on stuff with like the puck machine and everything like that. Now, the only thing we can really look at here from this view is really the boot break and how soft this is. Unfortunately, that Axis set, it is a custom set and it is the stiffest all the way through, so it doesn't have that internal break. The stock Axis set is much softer than what that one is, so it's not a direct comparison to the stock between these two. This one is the stock set, obviously, and boot is pretty soft. This isn't the super soft boot. They do have one other softer option, but it is pretty soft. CCM does have pretty soft boots. I noticed that a lot in my Eflex 4. Anyways, this is the kind of the internal break and how soft this is. It's still pretty stiff. Like, that's me putting effort into it. I'm sure you can break this in more to be softer and everything, but it is kind of like, it's not super soft, but it is pretty stiff. When we look at the Axis, I'll spin it around so it's the same view. You can see the boot is still really soft there. It honestly feels just as soft, if not almost a little softer than what the Eflex is. There is a lot of movement there, so keep that in mind. And for the actual thigh rise on this one, like I said, is that stiffer one. So that's a lot of force pushing that down. That is a really stiff core compared to the stock. The stock one isn't super stiff, but it's not super soft either. It is what it is. So for the first time in the Eflex line, they are offering different cores and well, it's not really a core, it's really like the face part here. So if you look really, really closely, you can see a blue foam through the little kind of cords right there. So you can see this blue foam, which is their control rebound foam, as you can see there. Very soft to the touch, very squishy. This is going to deaden pucks and deaden rebounds. This Max Core Plus is what is on the Axis pad, and you can see how much firmer that is, and it's nowhere near as soft. So the idea with this is it's going to push it rebounds out further because it's going to take less impact, so it's going to absorb less impact and just push things back out. Where this one is, because it's softness to it, it's going to absorb a lot of that impact. Different ideas, different preferences on pads. I don't mind that CCM is giving the option to do this. It does give you the nice option of giving this a bigger rebounding pad, just like the Axis, and some people like that. It also brings them on par with basically the Bauer Hyperlight, which is a softer pad in terms of flexibility through the face, but has bigger rebounds. So this will be a little bit more similar to that than what they kind of had before. Obviously, you can see you still have those knee rolls right here, including that exposed molded foam here, and the total flat face on the Axis. The other big difference here is you do have a much more pronounced outside roll. As you can see, I don't know if there's a max width you can have to this, but it is all like pretty max, pretty big, and it is still pretty soft. As you can see through that, it's pretty squishy, whereas the Axis has a much more like less defined and kind of angled roll, as you can see, and it's still pretty soft as well. So they're not going the hard route there, but it is an angled design, hopefully shown off by that, where it's a little bit smaller on the inside, as you can see there. Now, unfortunately, I can't bring these pads on ice, and I can't comment on how they slide and how they totally play. I can only go by past experiences with Eflex pads. Those past experience with the Eflex 4 was a terrible sliding pad. I don't want to say that this pad is going to be that terrible sliding. I've heard better things about it, but unless I use it myself, I don't want to comment on that. But you can see a big difference between the Axis design here and the Eflex design. You have that one piece all the way through right here. So instead of breaking it up in segments right there, it's like that. It also kind of acts a little bit flatter. You can see it here versus this. So you can see this piece, how it's kind of a little more rounded overall, and you can see the breaks in it right there. And also that is kind of the hardness to it compared to the Axis, which does have that like a lot straighter, I'm gonna say, an almost flatter design, and it does have a bit of a firmer piece right there. It's firmer when you go right here, but when you really hit on the edge, it's not. But right there, it is firmer than what is on the Eflex. Now, I will say the Axis was the best CCM sliding pad I've used ever. It was better than the Premiers by far. It was better than the Eflex 4 by far. And it is speed skin just like this one is. I'm not going to get into the speed skin talk on this video. This thing right here worked pretty well for the Axis, and it did seal the ice well as well when you're in your butterfly and stuff like that. This had a good thigh rise seal. I never had issues with CCM thigh rise seal at all. In fact, it always did pretty good for me. So even if this is a little bit more rounded, and people mentioned Eflex had thigh rise seal issues, I never found that. And all the evidence I've seen of it is people who really kind of crank it and they're a lot more curved. When you curve a pad, you're obviously going to lose some of that good seal and like natural seal, but I don't do that for my pads. I like them straight as possible. I like them straighter than this generally. So the way I wore them, I never had an issue there, but this one does a good job of that too. The knee block designs are honestly very similar. You can see all through here. I'll look on the inside in a little bit, but this design overall itself does feel very similar to one another, and almost like it's like the same company making these pads. Just slight differences here just in the width, but firmness and everything feels the exact same between the two. Connection points are similar, but a little bit different on the Axis, not a huge difference here. The one thing you can tell about CCM pads in general, and I'll point this out here, is if it's a pro version, you'll see lacing through here, all the way up here, and through here, all the way up here on both the Eflex 5s, 4s, and on the Axis. The reason being, there needs to be a gap between the calf this part right here and this wing. So Lefebvre used to do this when they built their pads. They would put that binding through all the way here, so it would create that gap. Lefebvre now on their pads don't have it up here, and it's only down here. CCM has continued it up here and here. So if you ever see a pro return piece of CCM gear in the future and you don't know what it is, if it's like actually pro return, just retail, if it does have the binding through here and here, you can see it's thick cord. It's like this cord, so it's really thick, really noticeable. That's how you can tell it's an actual from the pro department and not just a retail pad. This design right here also feels very similar, but it's constructed differently. The axis is a bit more flexible to it, but does have this piece below, which I'll show off in a different view, but it does feel a little bit more flexible than what is on the Eflex. Eflex feels like it's a bit of a more dense foam there, but the shape is pretty close between the two, as you can see. Not a huge difference there, pretty similar all around. The one thing is, I mentioned it earlier, but I want to call it out here because it's really noticeable as well. So the way that this design is made, so how I said it's almost more rounded, as you can kind of see, it does tuck the binding behind really the sliding edge like that. Whereas the axis, it is kind of on that exposed edge. You probably won't really feel it much when playing, but it's there and I want to call it out. I never noticed it. I never really noticed it getting wet, but there is a little bit of wear up here, but that could just be from the tips touching here and not actually from sliding. But I wanted to call that out. It's kind of a difference in how these sliding edges are made, especially in the thigh rise right here. Not as huge of a difference back here because it shouldn't really touch anywhere. And right here, we can see the differences in the boot. We'll put them right here to really show this off. It is a bit thicker boot on the Axis than it is on the Eflex, and like the actual face of the boot does feel stiffer than what is on the Eflex. And you can see that binding right here where it's right along the edge of the sliding surface. I've been critical about Bauer of this in the past because this spot is basically one of the big wear points on Bauer pads is this binding. CCM has it a little bit kind of regressed, I want to say. It's just pushed a little bit, so this shouldn't really get in the way because you can see you have your sliding edge. This part's going to touch you guys, and this part's a little bit behind, so it should be okay in that regard. Whereas this one, it is right on the edge right there, so a little disappointing there, but not a huge thing. Finally, rounding out the outside, you can kind of just see the thickness of these. The Axis one is thinner, and it looks a little bit more thinner than the Eflex too, just because of the bindingless design here where this part is still exposed, as you can see. So the thickness of this isn't that great of a difference right through here, but when you do get to the right here, you can see this Eflex is a bit thicker. But the big noticeable part on the Eflex is you can see how softer all the materials back here are and how the foam is. So this is all kind of nice and squishy, where the Eflex is hard all the way through. And that's kind of the idea of this pad, is to differentiate it, because this is the real big difference between these two pads. Like the biggest difference is that boot shape. So you can see the Eflex has that defined leg channel. A lot of pads are going away from this now, but it's still here, so you can really see how your skate fits in there, your leg fits in there, and you have all this softness around here. All this is really soft everywhere. Defined leg channel with a normal toe binding, nothing special there. But on the Axis, it's super flat. So you can see how slight channel here, but it's generally really flat all the way through. This is the more modern design. This is what most companies are going to now. I do like how CCM is kind of still having both of those, because Bauer doesn't anymore. Bauer's are all flat, and CCM's are, you can see the difference between these two is quite massive. So props to CCM for giving you those different options. Vaughn still does have that with the new SLR3 are going to come out, are going to be more flat. And then the V9 still have that more molded boot channel, traditional type boot channel. Toe ties are basically the same, exact same construction, everything right there. A good toe tie design for retail. Like these are pretty solid, so I gotta give them props for that. Sorry to keep switching the sides of these, but we're doing it. I mentioned how this piece right here feels firmer than what is on the Axis, and it's true, but you can see how the Axis one is built up with this molded foam piece right here, or whatever this is. I think it's a molded foam. Basically, it's like a more flexible piece here, but it has more to it. So when you get down to this area, it is harder and it does push out more compared to what this is. As you can see, this has your standard nylon wings, where this one is more interesting and different design, I should say. When you disconnect these, it really shows off that different piece right there, as you can see, just where this is pretty firm for what it is, and this is a little bit softer, but it does have that kind of bulk built into it like that. As you can see, the connections are fairly similar all the way through. This wing is kind of a similar idea. The only thing is with the Eflex, it has that second wing right there, right? So you get, instead of just having this bulk and then the wing, you have no bulk, one wing, two wings, and it kind of acts a similar way. This strap was an option, so ignore that for stock. This strap is the same on both. Great finishes with the rubber piece on there. CCM is really good at that. I always want to call them out how good their straps are because they're honestly the best in the industry, how nice they are to touch and the finish of them all. Exact same strap that goes across the calf on both. And then very similar quick motion. And the difference of the quick motion is it does have this molded piece right here because that is going to be the part touching your leg. So kind of pushing off a little bit, giving you a little extra padding. Whereas on the Eflex, it's just nylon. And again, probably the reason for that is because this inner piece exists, whereas this one doesn't. It's right against your leg. But it's very similar overall, just a different idea to it. This should show off like the channel size difference. The Eflex here does, obviously it comes a lot more in and it's a lot softer than what is on the Axis. But you can see where this outer wing is taken in from the pad, like over here, compared to right here where it's a lot smaller from the edge. So you have a much wider open leg channel on the Axis. As you can see, that's pretty opened up. And if you really loosen this, it will act like that as well. With the Eflex, it's much less so because this part is sewn more tighter in and this piece is in there as well, plus that piece, right? So there's a lot less movement going on here. You can actually order these tighter as well. CCM has a decent custom program for that, so you can order this even tighter than what this is, but that is a pretty significant difference. And like I mentioned, this boot, this area is really flat and it's pretty firm in here. A little bit of padding in there, but not a ton. Whereas the Eflex, you can really see how rounded that is and how plush and more soft that is through there. So interesting differences with that. Looking at the knee blocks, again, very similar designs here with just slight differences between them. But this strap, basically the same. Connectors, basically the same. A little smaller one on here compared to the Axis, but very minimal. Same connection types and everything like that. So very similar overall design there. Not adjustable on the Axis, but it is adjustable up on the Eflex. The calves themselves, as you can see, still have that strapping that's the same on both. This one is just from that extra strapping. It's not normally there on the Axis. And when we turn this on the inside, you can see the really similar knee block designs. You have that molded foam piece right here. The ridges are more defined on the Eflex than on the Axis, but for actual padding, they honestly feel really similar. It's basically the same material all the way through, just slightly different design on that. And when we pull it apart, you can see basically same design all the way through. So this part is mostly shared between the two, which isn't a problem. I just want to call it out there. Very similar designs all the way through. Finally, at the thigh rise, CCM does have their really interesting colorway in here that you can change on the customizer for the Axis, as you can see all the way down here. You can see the new bindingless top on the Axis compared to on the Eflex, which still has that binding, more traditional style. So I can bash my hands against this and you can hear this one versus this one. And the Eflex is more dead, but that's kind of the basis of it, of the softer face. But one of the biggest differences I've noticed on the Axis compared to my old Eflex, obviously I haven't worn the new ones on ice, but it's something I really want to call out because they feel very different when you wear them. And when I was wearing these, and I called it out on the review on this, whenever you would push or lean against the pad, the whole pad kind of goes like this. So this is with my knee hold, or my hand holding the knee block on the ground, where it would be when obviously your knee's on the ice. And whenever you would lean into like a RVH or something, the pad would tilt like this and would kind of move with your body. It feels like it's really connected to your leg, and it's an interesting design. Not something I'm criticizing. You can see it does open a gap down here, but it's something very noticeable, and it's something I don't notice on the Eflex. And just to show it over on this view as well, you can kind of see how that moves with you when you kind of lean into it. For the Eflex, when I'm holding that down, you can see the boot doesn't like rotate over and tip over, and it's a much more like almost firmer and more stable piece down here. The Axis are stable when you're playing with it and we're totally fine. It's just the Eflex, that design down here is a bit different. It's still stiff through here, like pretty stiff, and you can't really force it down like some pads, like Warrior pads, for example, but that really doesn't tilt nearly as much as the Axis one does, where it likes to almost roll over. And to show that from this point, like it moves a bit, but it doesn't move nearly as much as what the Axis does, and it doesn't feel like it's really like flipping over. So I wanted to cover the sizing differences between these two pads. These are both 34 plus 2s. When you stand them up next to each other, they kind of look like they all line up, and even the knee blocks look like they line up, but you should be able to see the difference in my knees. And no, this isn't me trying to make this one fit smaller or anything. This is my skates exactly where it should be. It's strapped the same way it should be. You can see the difference in height on that knee block. The Axis one does sit, I'm like almost an inch higher, and my knee sits way higher on the Eflex 4 compared to the Axis. Like I said in my Axis review, I normally wear a 35 CCM, so this one I would go with a 35. I found with a 34, and I've worn 34s before, I would fall out of the top of the block in these when I was trying to like slide around or do desperation saves. I'd always fall off the top of the block. With these, I found in a 34, if I like strapped them just like this, they were perfect. If I strapped the knee strap right here down to the calf, it would pull the pad up too much and I would fall below the knee. So this one played just like a 35 in my previous CCM pads, and an XL Bauer, and a 36 Warrior, and a 36 Bryans, and this one plays like a 34 in old CCM pads, so same as CCM pads. This one was basically a 34 equals a 36 in most companies, and a 34 equals a 35 in CCM, and this one is the same old sizing as always for CCM. So I want to show that off and show that difference. You can see the thigh rise differences too. Obviously there's some curve to this, but it's because of that flat boot design that this really happens. So obviously sitting down doesn't tell the whole story, but this really does. And this is me just dropping, and you can see the difference in the knee positioning here. Here all my weight is centered on the knee block. Here it's at the very top, and you can see the thigh rise difference as well. Both of these are 34 plus 2 pads, and you can see the difference in there. So be weary and be just noticeable of that difference. I would say to make the Axis play the same as the Eflex, you'd have to go down to a 33. Otherwise, as you can see, the difference is pretty substantial there. This picture does a good job of showing just how much higher the Axis pad sits on the skate compared to the Eflex 5. That translates all the way up into the thigh rise, where the Axis really does fit like a 35 plus 2 in previous CCM pad sizes, whereas the Eflex fits as a 34 plus 2, just as it's labeled, just as previous Eflex pads did and previous CCM pads did. So this really shows how high off the skate the Axis pad sits, where basically nothing but the very bottom and the toe of the pad touches the actual skate itself, and the side views really show how the channel pushes the pad up all the way through, and that's how you get that extra height. Versus the Eflex, you can see the sides of the pad and that boot channel really kind of wrap around the skate and cause the pad to fit like a normal CCM pad fit, whereas like that Axis does give you the extra height there and the extra size on it, where the CCM Eflex just fits like a normal pad because it does sit around that channel. So CCM now has two pretty distinct options in pads right now. I think that's a good thing. These are definitely different enough to have two different lines. They're very different lines. You might be able to find one that you prefer compared to the other. I think like Bauer, their two lines were too close together to really make a lot of sense two the Flylight. Before that, they were just too similar. These are like different enough, and I think CCM has done a good job with that and really having two different unique options for their two sets of pads. Basically, if you want a stiffer pad with probably bigger rebounds, this might be for you. Otherwise, if you want, like if you're comfortable in Eflex, obviously Eflex 5 is going to be more down that route. This, I think, isn't really a good replacement for Premier pads. It's a very different feeling. I hated Premier, and I actually really like these. So I don't think this is necessarily the best replacement for Premier, but it's definitely an option for people who do like the vapor pads or the ultrasonic pads. It's definitely an option in that sense, or like optic pads. It's more down that line than what the Premier was. But that's about it. Sorry I didn't do a lot more in this video. I'm really time crunched when filming this specific video. So I apologize on that. With that said, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully it was helpful. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them the best I can. But that's about it, and thank you very much for watching. Remember to subscribe to me on YouTube, follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and like this video. If you want to see me review specific sets of gear, please reach out to the companies on social media and stuff and let them know that. The only way a lot of this stuff will happen, I can't get my hands on everything. I can't buy everything. I can't do like real tests on anything because I can't afford to buy 20 sets of gear a year. So it'd be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, if you want to support the channel, check out the links in the description to Patreon and buy me a coffee. Everything that goes through there comes right back to the channel so I can keep doing videos and making more content. If you live in the United States and you want to support the channel and you're going to buy hockey equipment or anything hockey related, check out the link in the description to Pure Hockey, Pure Goalie. Clicking that link and making a purchase gives me a kickback, which will support the channel, and you're going to buy hockey stuff anyways. So just be greatly appreciated and just throw a little bit my way. It doesn't cost you anything. It just helps through a clickback. Thank you very much for watching and take it easy.
You're watching HockeyReviews.ca.